This is the Atomos Ninja 5, and I assume the name is because it's a 5-inch monitor, but it's not just a monitor, it's also a recorder, which is one of the things that really sets it apart from a lot of other on-camera monitors, and one of the reasons why I'm really glad that I got it. I'll get into the Ninja in just a sec, but I got a bunch of other stuff recently because of this, and I'm just gonna quickly go over what happened there. So I bought the Ninja at my local camera shop because they had it for a really good price. And then about 2 weeks later, once I'd gotten an SSD for it, I went in to get a SATA to USB adapter to use said SSD efficiently. So when I asked about it, the guy at the camera shop told me that they were currently doing this bundle that was meant to be for a Nikon camera that they just sold out of quicker than they expected. So they still have all these bundles left, and it included the Ninja, it included a 500GB SSD and the adapter for that SSD, but also a VideoMic Pro Plus, a Moza Air 2 gimbal, an HDMI cable, and a magic arm for the gimbal. So of course I got the bundle, and basically I just swapped my Ninja for the one that was in the bundle and ended up paying $350 for all this stuff because I'd already paid for this. So that's pretty cool. I will do videos on the mic and the gimbal soon, so subscribe to see those ones, but let's get back to the Ninja. So starting with the monitor features, the Ninja 5 is a 5.5-inch 1080p display, but at that size, the pixel density is still pretty solid. The display is also touchscreen, and as an HDR display and a display that you want to use probably in bright environments like out in the sun, it actually gets up to 1000 nits. So it's plenty bright for any sort of situation that it would really need to be in. And you can of course adjust the brightness and all that stuff. So I think I only have it turned to about 50% right now, and I haven't really changed it since I set that. And that 1000 nits is gonna be significantly brighter than any built-in LCD on any camera. If you're unfamiliar with on-camera monitors, they usually have a bunch of tools to help with framing, focus, and exposure. And this has all the things that you would sort of want it to have. You just tap this yellow button here, and then you can scroll across all of the tools on this toolbar down the bottom. And with the touchscreen, you just toggle them on or off by tapping on them. The tools that I've used the most are the 2x crop or the 1:1 crop. So you just tap it just to zoom in to check focus, and focus peaking, which highlights anything that's in focus in whatever color you want. I've just got it set to red, which is the same that I have it on my A7 IV. And then for exposure, you have things like zebras, you've got histograms, so you can just see the overall amount of light in the scene, which is great to check if things are peaking. So when I shot a little bit in S-Log3, I actually used all of these exposure features to double check everything. And then the one that I really have liked using is false color. If you don't know what false color is, as you can see on the side here, it just has a different color for each level of exposure. So brighter things will be a certain color and darker things will be a certain color, and it divides it really well so you can see exactly how exposed everything in the scene is. And I get why people like it so much. You can also just tap the screen if you just want to see a clean, basically clean HDMI signal with nothing on it. And I usually do that once I'm recording and once everything's going, I'll just leave it as a clean setup if I don't need to check exposure or focus or anything while it's going. And there's of course the framing stuff like the grid, and you can also set frame guides, and I have mine set to 16:9 just in case I ever want to make sure that something is able to be repurposed for vertical content. So I just tap that, and then it shows me what my aspect ratio would look like if I were to crop it out of the whole image. And there's a handful of other features that I haven't talked about, including anamorphic D-squeeze, which I don't have any anamorphic lenses, so that's not really helpful for me, but if you have anamorphic lenses, having a monitor that can de-squeeze it can be vital for checking that everything looks right. The physical features of the Ninja are also pretty solid. It has HDMI in and out, although the out is only limited to 1080p. On the other side, apart from the power button, it has a mic and line input, a headphone output, and a remote port. On the back, it has a slot for Sony NPF batteries. I use the 970s, which are pretty big and heavy, but they last for a long time, and they just snap in like that. It also comes with what they call a battery eliminator, which is basically like a dummy battery or a DC adapter, just goes right into the battery slot, and then it just has a DC port here that you plug it in. It comes with one that goes straight into the wall, but this will probably be what I use once I get some V-mount batteries, and then I can power the entire rig on one battery. So just a DC cable out of this into the battery, and then this just has power based fully on that battery. And finally, on the back, we have the SSD slot right here, which is just a SATA interface, which is most commonly used in internal drives for computers. And that means that any 2.5-inch SATA SSD should work for recording media on this, like one of these. And this is just inside the caddy that comes with the Ninja. And in here, I just have a 500GB Samsung 870 EVO SSD, which once it's in this caddy, slots in the back, it works perfectly fine. But the one downside is these 2.5-inch drives are bigger than what would be ideal for this device, really, because they do stick out more. However, the internal of these drives don't actually take up the entire space. So you could take it apart and get a special little enclosure for it that would take up less space. Or you get one of the Angelbird Atom X SSDs, which I got in that bundle, that is designed specifically for this, and it fits way better and doesn't stick out at all. And I wasn't particularly comfortable with leaving the 2.5-inch in the monitor when it was in my camera bag, because it stuck out kind of an awkward amount. So I'm very, very happy that I was able to get one of these for the price that I did. This Angelbird drive feels so much more sturdy and tough, which I guess is probably the reason why they cost about 4 or 5 times as much as the Samsung for the same capacity. So that leads us to the recording features of the monitor. Now, it can record up to 4K 60 FPS in a handful of codecs, including Apple ProRes, ProRes RAW, H.265 if you pay for it, and Avid DNX. And I record in DNX HRLB, which is the most compressed format of the DNX HR codec, but it's a higher bitrate than the XAVCS codec in the A7 IV, but not so much that the file sizes are ridiculously big. They're just a bit bigger, which is okay. I can deal with that. But hopefully it means that they're slightly easier to edit for the computer. So why record externally? There's actually a few benefits. Firstly, SSDs are faster, cheaper, and can go to higher capacities than any SD cards, and they're generally at least cheaper and higher capacity compared to CF Express Type A cards, because CF Express Type A cards are pretty fast, but they're way more expensive than an SSD. And with SSDs, you can get multiple terabytes very easily. Obviously, you are going to have to pay more for that, but you could get a 2 terabyte Samsung EVO for about the same price that you could get a 128 gig V90 SD card. Or for cheaper, then you could get an 80 gigabyte CF Express Type A card. Secondly is the codecs. Now, because the Ninja takes the HDMI signal directly from the camera's sensor, you don't even need to record anything internally, and you don't need to worry about any sort of compression from the codec used by the camera's recording. So you can have much easier to work with files, because those larger files are less compressed. So the editing program that you're going to use and your computer are going to have to do less work to unpack all of that compressed data, because it's much less compressed. But this doesn't mean that if your camera can't do 10-bit that you can just suddenly have 10-bit color. It still is very dependent on the sensor of the camera. But whatever the camera is outputting, it can take that and it compresses it itself separately from the camera. And finally, if you're not recording internally, then the battery life on the camera itself is likely going to last a lot longer, because it has much less processing to do. All it has to do is be on and send that data through the HDMI out. So if you have a camera that is prone to overheating, then that could be a serious benefit, especially if you're recording longer recordings and you're worried your camera might overheat. If you record externally, the processing power will be a bit lower, therefore less heat is generated, so you're less likely to overheat your camera. But you can also record both internally and externally, so you can then have redundant recordings. One other sort of niche benefit of external recording is if you do want to record the information that's on your camera screen as well as the image itself, is if you just go into your camera settings and set your HDMI info out display to display, then just like this recording here, you can see all of what you would see on the back of the camera. So if you want to show a bit more of a behind the scenes, or if you're trying to talk about the camera settings, or if you want to go into the menu of the camera, then you can record all of that. And this can be pretty useful for videos about cameras or camera settings and anything like that. Overall, my experience with the Ninja 5 has been pretty good. I did have to get a new monitor mount though, because the one that I originally had was not quite strong enough to hold up the monitor with the battery on the back, because those NPF 970 batteries are pretty heavy. So I did get a stronger and more versatile monitor mount. I also got a Condor Blue coiled HDMI cable, because the small rig one that I got originally was just not quite long enough for some of the rigs that I wanted to make. So the coiled one is a little bit longer, and obviously it can be more compact when it's all the way in. I kind of feel like maybe I should have got the uncoiled one that is a bit longer, but I think this one will be fine for now. It's not a big deal. One thing that I wish the Ninja did have is mounting points on the sides. Now, I kind of get why they don't, because there's a lot of I/O on the sides. Now, they do have mounting points on the top and bottom that have locating pins, and they're a 3/8 inch threaded hole with a 1/4 inch insert, so you can use 1/4 or 3/8 inch threads. But the locating pins are very useful, especially when using a monitor mount like this, because it has those locating pins. And not having to worry about your monitor rotating on the mount is pretty useful. But it would be nice to have mounting points on the side, so then making vertical rigs would be a little bit easier, but it's not a huge deal. I can make do with what I have. And when it comes to the build quality, everything feels very solid. There's nothing that feels really cheap, except the power button just feels a little cheap, a little loose, but everything else is super solid, and it just feels like a tough machine. And finally, I knew going into it that the fan in this is pretty loud, but it really isn't. And unless you or your microphone are right next to where this fan is, it's probably not going to be an issue for most people, and certainly not for me. So that's pretty much it on the Atomos Ninja 5. Let me know what you think about it in the comments if you have any thoughts, and while you're down there, do all the other things. If you need another video to watch, this one is all about recording audio for videos like this, and I think it's one of my most underrated videos. Or this one is a behind the scenes of an interview setup that I shot recently. That is all. Okay, bye.